Starfield. This is a game that I have been genuinely looking forward to ever since I first learned of it. It was Bethesda's new original IP, and there was a lot of hype surrounding it. And considering that I was a fanboy of Bethesda games, I immediately jumped into it. My initial thoughts on the game, despite the technical difficulties I faced with it, was overall positive. I've enjoyed it, even though I find something lacking, something off, something I couldn't quite put my thumb on. But still, I enjoyed what it had to offer. I've had quite a bit of fun with it. Then, during the making of this video, I found out what it was. You see, in the process of making this video, I reinstalled Fallout 4 and Skyrim. I was trying to get footage of the two games to compare their gameplay against Starfield. Things were still fine at Fallout 4, but once I've booted up Skyrim, I immediately find myself immersed in that game once more. I was once again amazed, in awe, and found myself exploring Skyrim once again. It felt like I've booted that game up for the first time, even though I've played through it multiple times. That was not something I experienced when playing Starfield, and that got me thinking, why? Why did I feel that way towards Skyrim and not towards Starfield? And by the way, full spoilers up ahead. My first thought, the nostalgia factor. I won't lie, this game was a big part of my life during my high school days, and I've genuinely considered that as the reason. Maybe I was biased. That is until I went back to Starfield. The game felt dull and boring. My opinion of the game turned a complete 180, and I was confused. Why do I not enjoy this game anymore? I found it pretty fun just a day ago. What changed? That's when I realized nothing has changed. The game has always been that way. I just never noticed it because, one, as I said, personal bias, and two, was that before this, I was playing the game by itself. But now that I've played Skyrim again, the illusion of Starfield being a good game quickly wore off. After that, I spent some time to sit down and actually identify the problems with Starfield. Since we have two other games from Bethesda that we can use as reference and benchmarks for the game, this sped up the process a lot. Ever heard of first impressions? First thing I noticed was the lack of any opening cinematic set pieces. Skyrim and Fallout 4 had some spectacular scenes that set the tone of the game right out of the gate. Alduin shows up and destroys everything, a nuclear bomb going off as you descend into the vault. These scenes were designed to send a message and set the tone for the rest of the game. Skyrim sent a message of a cold and unforgiving fantasy, while Fallout sent a message of complete devastation. And they continue, even after you've stepped out of Helgen or the vault. The atmosphere and the mood of the game displayed and blasted full force at your face, from the freezing mountains of Skyrim to the radioactive wasteland of the Commonwealth. Starfield's attempt, on the other hand, was lacking, to say the least. You start in a mine, pick up some strange artifact, and then the game takes you on what can only be described as an LSD trip. Although I understand that they're trying to sell the whole cosmic mystery thing, this isn't immediately understood until much later into the game. The beginning sections of the game went just as any other Bethesda game does until you get your first ship to travel into space. Therein lies their first mistake. What should have been an epic and cinematic moment turned into something you see every time you take off. Whereas in Skyrim, from escaping Helgen to slaying your first dragon, even all the way up to High Hrothgar, the whole 7,000 steps felt handcrafted and designed to lure you in with potential exploration points in the distance. But when you compare it to Starfield, it falls flat on its face. There is nothing in the distance that pulls you in, that lures you to explore the game as much as the ones in Skyrim or Fallout does. Which brings me to my next point. Next thing I noticed was how barren the game was. Although it made sense in some of the planets where life does not exist, and the whole point of it was that it was a barren wasteland. However, things like tunnels, canyons, mountains, ravines are very rarely seen. There are caves, but they are basically just a cache of rare materials and nothing else. Even planets with life on it doesn't fare any better. It feels like most of it is just recycled assets copy and pasted over and over. Handcrafted locations are almost non-existent except for when it involves a major quest line. And it's not like you can stumble upon a hidden quest like the Dragon Priests or an area like the Black Reach. Even Fallout had some places hidden off the beaten path with interesting and unique places that don't involve any major quest lines like the Rocket Shack, a car henge, and even an alien encounter. And after more than 100 hours sunk into this game, it's safe to say that they simply do not exist. Every location or dungeons are the same ones recycled over and over again. And I do mean everything, from enemy placements, to how the dungeon is going to go, to the end chest, they are all the same. If you've seen one, you've seen them all. Any unique points of interest you may come across is most definitely tied to some major quest down the line. However, I do have to point out, every once in a while, you run into some beautiful scenery that makes exploring somewhat worth it, but you really need to be patient and lucky, because they are completely random and really hard to come by. The gameplay was another thing that I'm not really a fan of either. In terms of gameplay, it is much more similar to Fallout, but somehow, they've managed to make it both worse and better. Hear me out. My biggest problem with Fallout's combat was how clunky and awkward most of the weapons feel. Other than that, everything else was mostly fine. In Starfield, however, it was the other way around. Most of their weapons feel great, emphasis on most of them. I do appreciate a burst fire mod, that is by far my favorite type of weapon. And I absolutely loved this shotgun. It was awesome. However, everything else kind of falls apart. The pacing was the biggest issue here. Most of the enemies have trouble finding you. It's not as if I was sneaking either. You can have a full-blown firefight with half of the enemies you're fighting not knowing how to get to you. Their pathfinding AI kind of just fails. It feels like they were programmed by an intern, and when you compare it to Fallout, it's just night and day. The stealth sections are not that good either. The stealth only works like half the time. I've had a stealth section that was bugged out that caused enemies to spot me almost instantly through the back of their heads, which infuriated me so much that I gave up being stealthy and just went on a killing spree. And apparently, I'm not the only one that feels that way, since there is a stealth overhaul mod already available which works closer to Fallout. There's also an outpost and mining system which absolutely sucked. It was tedious, boring, and worst of all, no real benefit to actually doing it. It's just there for the sake of being there. Building a mining outpost does not help you at all. You don't need that much iron or whatever it is you're looking for. You don't need to spend hours mining, grinding until your head grows numb for the resources, when you can just buy them. Seriously, they're not even that expensive. And once you get to mid-game, not even the late game, you basically have an endless amount of money at your disposal. Don't get me wrong, I love myself a good base building game, but this was not one of them. And being as tedious as it is, sucked all the joy that could have come from it. The only saving grace that this game has are its quests. The main quest line, the faction quests, and some of the companion missions are some of the best to date in Bethesda's arsenal. I was genuinely blown away. There's political intrigue, spies, corporate espionage, undercover shit, and even detective work where you have to decide which witness do you actually want to present to the court to make your case. This is the part where the game truly shines, especially the faction quests. There are moral choices which will affect the ending of these quests and turn you into the hero, the villain, the accomplice, or everything at once. I love the idea that not everything is black and white, and some choices, even though you know is right, you still be scorned by some NPCs for making it. These quests are the single thing holding this game together. Like seriously, it is carrying the weight of this game on their backs. The side quests, on the other hand, are for the most part boring, although I have yet to play every single one of them. Most of them don't offer much story-wise and feel like they're just there to fill up the space. Like I said earlier, there are almost no hidden quests or unique landmarks where you can just stumble in the middle of nowhere. I did, however, ran into a quest which involves a self-aware AI, which in itself was quite interesting. Not sure if it was scripted though, but there are a few quests like that, just rare. The main quest line was pretty good, with some great twists that I personally enjoyed. However, there was one huge problem that I have with it. At one point of the game, your HQ, or the Constellation HQ, comes under attack on two different locations, which is the Eye and the Lodge. And one of your main companions has to die. The game forces you to choose between two of your closest companions to save, while the other one dies. That in itself wouldn't be much of a problem. I can live with the fact that the game does not offer a perfect ending. Hell, I even prefer it that way. I mean, Red Dead Redemption and Final Fantasy VII were the perfect examples that you don't need perfect endings to have a good game. The problem is what comes after you finish the main quest. You're given the option to go into New Game Plus, where your character, armed with prior knowledge of the attack, now gets the chance to save everyone. And that was the nail in the coffin for me. It just felt like they're trying to artificially extend playtime by resetting everything, except for your levels, your perks, your character background, and powers. Yes, there's powers. There's a Starfield version of a Fussroda, and no, it was only fun for about 30 seconds. And that's it. Everything else wiped clean, and you restart from the beginning. All that grinding I did for the materials, for the ship, for the weapons and equipments are just gone. They're gone. I don't know how many of you remember the era of memory cards, but if you do, try and think back to having your save files in there after hours and hours of gameplay just wiped clean. That's how it felt to me. Though you do get a new ship and suit in New Game Plus, which was pretty cool, but it's not enough. As good as the story and faction quests were for me, they're not enough for me to play through it a second time, especially with all the other problems plaguing it. Even though New Game Plus offers some changes to the story, albeit minor ones. I don't know, maybe I'll pick it up again in the future and see how it goes, but as of now, it's just bad. It is a shame that Starfield is what it is. There was a lot of potential behind it, and the developers definitely dropped the ball on this one. Maybe once the creation kit is released, the modders might do something to save the game. Or from what I've heard, there's a DLC coming out sometime in the future. Maybe that will fix most of its problems, like Cyberpunk. We'll just have to wait and see. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video and found it informative. This video took a lot of time and effort to make, so please hit the like and subscribe button if you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.